1. A bit of backstory first. So this was years ago while I was working at a telemarketing company as a frontline support. The company I worked at was small but efficient and worked mostly with business-to-business telephony. While we had no direct technical control of landlines and telephony, we worked closely with providers, handling first-line tickets like SIM card activation, providing a system that gave the companies a comprehensive overview of their different connections, which fixed line number was connected to what mobile number, etc. We had a list of all known associate companies that provided services, so if somebody called us an error to discuss an invoice from a provider, for example, we would tell them which department, person, company they could call. We rarely call providers unless someone paid us to be the middleman. In those cases, we could be the one to call providers with technical issue. So, the company had just enlisted a new client. Mainly the new client was working with healthcare. They had more than a few hospitals and domestic services. They were paying for mobile support and to have the overlook of which landline goes where solution, but not really for the tech support to provider. Reason being that they were switching providers, so mostly I helped them with resetting iPhones, porting cell phone plans, or issues related to it and/or forwarding them to the department which could help them with their fixed lines. But since they often called regarding fixed lines, I had read up on how their solution was set up and would sometimes help them with basic troubleshooting. They had a lot of different solutions, however, so it was impossible to keep track of all the details for each building. One day, I get a call from somebody that sounded like their heart was about to explode in their chest. After many "calm down, what seems to be the matters," etc., they got around to explaining that their entire hospital was without internet and fixed-line telephones wasn't working. This had happened once or twice before for other hospitals due to the porting, so I asked if they had been briefed by the suppliers about the outage and explained that the outage should only be very brief. Nope, the lines just went dead. I tried to de-escalate the tension and explained that the fixed line gets rerouted to their mobile phones, so as long as they have power, then at least the calls would be getting through. However, this particular hospital was special in the way that more than domestic services and basic healthcare, they also had an emergency room. The fixed line to emergency was connected to a special landline, was separate from other lines, so even if the regular lines was cut, it would still operate. That line was also down, so if there was an accident, then emergency services couldn't get through and ambulances wouldn't be dispatched. As it was, the hospital was slow to a crawl. I was pretty young at the time and I didn't know what to do. Normally, I would refer them to the provider, but this time I just felt like every second they spent on the phone meant 2 hands less in the hospital. I called up the provider to see what was going on. I jumped through a lot of "I'll forward your call" hoops until I got to the person in charge, but all they could tell me was that the lines were down and they had no idea why. The port had gone through weeks ago with no issues. They were also hard at work trying to figure out what had gone wrong. What? I'm sort of panicking. I don't know why I felt so responsible, but I kept digging and digging and digging. To be honest, I'm not sure how the hell I wound up where I did, but I found myself talking to somebody working in municipality, and I asked if they knew anything that would explain this. They said the only thing they could think of was that some work was being done in the rural area next to the hospital. I asked for the number, and after some convincing, I got it. I reached some loosey-goosey guy. I hear machinery in the background, and barely make out what he is saying. I explain very briefly who I am, why I am calling, and what they are doing, and if something has happened. With a scoff, almost a laugh, he says that while digging to lay down broadband cables, they've accidentally severed something. But they filed a report and that somebody should be able to be fixing that in like a couple of weeks. I sort of blacked out. I just remember my colleague's worried expression peeking over the screen as I screamed and ranted. Almost a minute of silence on the other end, and the silence broke.
"I'll see if our guys can work overtime, if you can get someone out here ASAP."
I call back to the provider and explain the situation. Again, I cannot believe the arrogance. It's almost closing time. We'll resume this tomorrow. Again, blackout. All I remember screaming is, "It's a hospital! They take care of people!" Again, silence. Again, "We'll send someone." Midday, day after, it was fixed. I don't know what I expected to happen next, but I didn't quite expect for it to go so quiet. The client didn't call to thank me. The provider didn't either. Not a word of thanks from anyone. But I guess if that's what I was after, I'm in the wrong line of business. The boss at least gave me a well done and a Christmas bonus. I guess that's something. 2. I'd been hired as a junior mainframe programmer, my first real programming job. I had just finished 6 months of COBOL training, and with Y2K approaching, the company was desperate to get more developers. I spent my first couple of months learning various mainframe technologies, including JCL, Job Control Language, which tells jobs to run, when to run them, and how, and a few other things. A job in this context is a series of multiple programs, usually COBOL, run in sequence by the JCL. If any step in the job fails, there's a set of written instructions for operators to use to figure out how or if they can restart the job and complete it. One thing which was very useful was the process of trying to get things to run in the mainframe test region. I had to copy over files individually, and then manually cut and paste a bunch of information to get the software to run on the new region. Since I was using an IBM terminal emulator that had VBA installed, I started playing around with it and soon built myself a set of tools to automate copying JCL, all of the programs the JCL would run, and update the data for me. It made life much easier. More on that later. The team lead from hell. Our team lead was interesting. She was a former operator. She didn't know much about programming, but she knew everything else about the system. If something needed to be done, she couldn't program it easily, but if you went to her, she could tell you anything you needed to know to get it done yourself. A senior developer was transferred to our team, and after a few weeks she was sick of how our nightly batch jobs would keep failing. The JCL only allocated the bare minimum of disk space to each step, and we would routinely get calls at night saying a job had run out of disk space. So this developer started upping the disk space for the jobs, but the team lead ordered her to stop. If the jobs don't fail, they won't need us. Holy shit. Our team lead was deliberately hobbling development because if we did our job too well, they might want fewer programmers and she couldn't program. As it turns out, I'm a pretty good programmer and quickly started being very productive, so the team lead naturally hated me. I was a threat. It probably also didn't help that I asked her why she kept a Bible on her desk, and in the ensuing conversation, revealed that I wasn't a Christian. Y2K was closing in and the inevitable code freeze hit. I was bored. I was sitting in my cube doing nothing all day long, so I went to the manager and asked what I could do. Go see your team lead. Uh-oh. I knew this wasn't going to end well. I went to see our team lead. She looked at me and said, "We've been needing a new mainframe test region for a while, but we haven't had the time to build one. This is perfect for you." I didn't realize the full scope, but when I asked around, I was told this was a month of cutting and pasting files from region to region, an entire month of Control-C, Control-V, and manually updating all of the data in the files to point to the new region. My team lead initially found a way to both kill my productivity and punish me. I went back to my desk seriously depressed. My first real programming job, and I was getting fucked by politics. This company also refused to let me have an empty cubicle with a window seat, because those were reserved for senior developers. When I remembered my VBA tools, they could only operate on a single JCL file at a time, but that would save me some time. But I'd still have to manually run this once for every JCL file, entering all of the new region data by hand. That's when I built my first spider, I realized I could write code to walk through the primary region and feed all of the data to the VBA code to do this for me. It took me a few hours to get it working and I ran it. I went to a late lunch, and it was almost done when I got back to my cube. After a bit of time it finished, and in poking around it looked like it was done. I sent out an email to my team letting them know I was finished. But since I had never done this before, could they please double-check my work? People started coming over to my cube asking me how I did it. The manager came over amazed. The team lead sent me an email, copied to the entire team, saying that I was sloppy and I hadn't updated the email addresses. That took me a couple of minutes to fix. In my 6-month evaluation, she wrote that I was sloppy, the email addresses, and didn't show attention to detail. Because I had written the code in VBA, it wasn't maintainable, and thus was useless to everyone. Fortunately, the manager understood what was going on and ignored this. But that was my first experience with corporate IT politics. It rarely stopped since then. 3. I was in the office for the first time in almost 3 years today. I was called in for a meeting. The reasons were vague. Something was calling. I came in for a lunch meeting, driving the familiar paths I'd once known, now overgrown and unfamiliar. The empty lot. It was an Arby's a moment ago, wasn't it? The mind plays tricks. Time is slippery. I pull in. The parking lot looks quiet. No joggers. A couple dozen cars. Life but sparse. Where are the geese? Bemused, I wander inside. Everything is sparkling, cleaner than I've ever seen it. No sign of tenants in the first floor. The smell of fresh paint is strong. Strong enough to block out something else, something darker, perhaps. I reach the elevators, and the stub of a floor that remains after we'd given most of it back a year ago. Still seeing no one. Once there, I find a nondescript door in a nondescript hallway, no signs, and my badge lets me through. Safety? Maybe. Voices at least. Some signs of life, perhaps. I find a tiny group manning desks in an otherwise empty office, having a team party? For ghostly members wafted in from the corners of the earth visiting the state this week only. The lights are wrong. It's subtle, but I can see it. The shift to hard mechanical blue. Unearthly, makes my teeth itch. The subliminal ominous hum that's barely on the edge of hearing but never quite gone. You chase the white noise and the nothingness expands until all that's left is thundering drums. Pressing deeper, I leave the damned to their ghostly pleasures and stalk through the abandoned temple to capitalism, struck by the endless limbo before me. Desks blank, pristine. Cube walls empty and clear. No computers ever marred these surfaces. No cables scattered about. I feel deeper in the backroom space than I've ever been. Why is it so dark at the end of these rows? What lurks in the darkened offices beyond? How does this space persist? What horror makes it a home and a hunting ground? I move upwards, to what explorers said was a manned public-facing outpost higher in the old building. A desk. A human. Again, my badge raised in the old gestures works its magic, and the doors open before me. A cheerful human says, "Someone from IT left his charger. There's no name on it." I thank them, assuring them that indeed the sacred burden was meant for me, and I would see it was done. The walls seem to breathe faintly, or is it only my panic? She seems so normal, and yet, for who is this stage set? Are there still dwellers beyond the threshold awaiting unwary? I cannot say, for I was not invited to those halls. I escaped my sanity intact, and my errand complete, though alas, my intended meeting still unfilled. The other party never came, or at least made it as far as the meeting room. though something still speaks in his voice on Teams. 4. So I just started my first help desk technician job last week, to preface this. This lady was my second call ever, and it appeared an easy ticket, as she just needed her password reset. Little did I know. So I pull up Office admin page to change the password and select Change Password on Next Login. I call the client to tell her I reset the password, and she can go ahead and try to log in now with the new password and reset it on login. When she puts in the new password, she gets a fail to authenticate user error. I become a little flustered as this is supposed to be my easiest task, and I screwed up out of the gate. So I look over in a slight panic at my team member who has been training me, and he fills me in that since they are on a MacBook, I am unable to use the change password on first login with Office. I try to explain this as I'm having it explained to me, and she's not having any of it. What do you mean? I have used Apple for over 10 years and have always been able to reset my password. Continue to try to explain to her that it isn't a big deal, she just needs to tell me what she wants her password to be. I'm not doing that! Reset her password without the change at login selected to just a temp password so she can log into her email on her MacBook. But she attempts to log into her email on her phone, and now she can't get into her work email on her phone. She can log in through the browser on her phone, but not her native iPhone email app. And she is pissed that she can't set her own password and does not accept that Apple OS is having issues. Maybe our Tier 3 is wrong, but he took the time to give me a satisfactory answer. She just didn't accept it. My doubts lie with her, not his explanation, and thinks they as a user should have admin privileges to do password resets, and none of this would be an issue. I tell her I will have to consult with some of my colleagues and will call her back when we have a resolution. I consult with our Tier 3 at this point, explaining that she won't say the password she wants set, so he advises to do a remote connection and log into the admin page on a private browser through her machine, and have her enter the password so it's never in plain text, since that seems to be her concern. And tell her to try using the Outlook app for mail on her phone. He didn't really have time to elaborate on the phone, but didn't think he needed to as Outlook app was the easy answer. Call the client back to make her aware of what we think will help. She tells me very firmly she is using the Outlook app, and that she even wiped the cache to clear the user info and still couldn't log in. I try to confirm that she is using Outlook app from the iPhone App Store. She says yes. She keeps selecting Outlook.com at the login page. My team member was monitoring the call at this point and looks at me wildly shaking his head. No. I am not familiar with iPhone, not really my job to be, as we don't offer support to mobile devices. But we have to make a best effort to resolve the issue for the client. So he explains that she is using the native Mail app for iPhone and needs to download Outlook for security reasons when accessing her work Outlook account. I try explaining to no avail, and at this point she is just downright belligerent because I have admitted I'm not an iPhone user and we don't have a way to remote to her phone so I can offer better support. I pass her off to my team member because he explains to her he uses an iPhone, and he was able to log into her email through his phone on the Outlook app, but not the native Mail app, and it seems like her only solution is to use the Outlook app. She tells him we need to figure this out, and it is unacceptable, and it's clearly a Microsoft issue. We are not Microsoft, so figure it out. He repeats the issue is the iPhone app, not the Outlook app, and she can take the fix or not, but we have provided support to the best of our ability, and we are closing this ticket. That was exhausting to relive. So if you listen to all of this, please tell me they won't all be like that. Because even my team member wanted to kick this lady off a bridge into a shallow creek. 5. This was almost 20 years ago when I was a local IMO at a US Army base in Germany. We had about 400 plus users and I had 7 to 9 help desk personnel. a little remote capability, mostly push updates, scanning and such. Well, I got on average 15 to 25 help desk calls a day, and pass them out to my guys in the morning, and I also do some of the calls. But like any help desk, it takes time to get to everyone. We were using WinXP Pro, with DoD modifications applied, on all our machines and had restricted admin access. We used admin CAC cards to only help desk personnel. I have 3 calls that I am working on and have to physically go to the PC and work the issues. My 3rd call I get to at about 10:45 hours was a boot issue, most likely a corrupt WinExe file. So I go to the user's PC and she says that she fixed it but can't get to her files. I take a look at her machine and notice the login screen is gone. WTF? And it's going straight into the desktop screen. Except this is not a WinXP Pro desktop. It's missing all the Windows app suite, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, etc. I go into settings and see the WinXP version, and lo and behold, it's Windows XP Home Edition. I pop the disk tray open, and there is a Windows XP Home Edition disk. I ask her where did this come from, and her response was one for the ages. After she left a message about her PC issue at 07:45 that morning, she waited around 30 minutes, and she decided to fix it herself, so she went home. She lived on the base, so it only took 5 minutes, and got her Windows XP Home Edition disk. Since she had rebuilt her home PC, she thought she knew what she was doing. And since the PC in her work office was restricted to admins only, she thought it was a good idea to reinstall Windows using her disk. Well, she booted from the CD and installed the Home Edition over the top of the Pro Edition, and completely wiped and formatted the drive. All of the data and apps were gone. This infuriated me. I jumped down her throat telling her that she violated every term of her user agreement. She didn't think it was a big deal. She couldn't understand why I couldn't just find her data and files. I told her that everything was gone. We did not have a separate or remote backup. Everyone was supposed to do a weekly backup to a disk or a CD, which she didn't. And in my opinion, I have the authority to suspend users' access to the network, and I promptly did so. Now she only had local access, with no network or email, or even network printer access. I informed her supervisor of her suspension due to her violation of the user's terms of agreement, and he complained that she can't do her work without network access, which I replied that's his problem, and I explained it like a taxi driver has their license suspended for cause. They can still get in the taxi, but can't drive it anywhere. Of course, he didn't like that I suspended her and went to the commander and said I was being unreasonable. The commander contacted me and asked for the reason, and I told him why. He said he could order me to reinstate her, and I told him, yeah, you could, but I would refuse and resign and go back to the States. I was a GS-11, and he could not stop me from doing that. I asked him if it's worth losing a GS-11 over a clearly incompetent and clearly in the wrong GS-6. I would have also told my higher HQ IT people and the network signal battalion the issue, so they would have leaked it to the higher chain of command and caused him a hell of a bunch of trouble. He backed off and her suspension stayed in place. I reinstalled WinXP Pro and all the apps on the PC that afternoon, so she could still work without network access, but when she needed to print or send files, she had to download to a 3.5 disk and give to someone, and they had to do the print or send files. Her suspension was for 45 days, but she was also required to do some remedial computer training at the computer training lab next door, which she never did, so her suspension stayed in place. At the next staff meeting, I told every staff officer there that the computers are US government property and not to be tampered with to fix an issue. I also informed her superior in writing that I expected a civilian evaluation be noted of her failure. But this was all for naught, as she quit about 4 months after the incident. So now I tell people this story as my worst user ever. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Terrific Tales of Technology, episode 30. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Before you go, if you could please interface with the like button and smash it, and send the video to friends and family, if you would be so good. Also, in the description, links. Right down there. You can't see what I'm pointing down right now. Okay, let's see. Let's move right along to Hellfreezer's question of the day. And today's question is, what, in your opinion, is the superior type of pancake? Now, a confession to make, the most adventurous I've ever gotten with a pancake is putting Nutella on it. I know, it's shocking, but I will endeavor to do better in the future, and I can do that with your help. So why don't you leave me your wonderful pancake ideas in a comment below. I'll look forward to reading them. And with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourself.